They say you should never make your career your identity, but when you're a single mother rebuilding her life from scratch, it doesn't feel like a choice. I'm Maya Rodriguez, I'm 39 years old, and until last week I was working on a 6-month web design project for Victoria Chen's tech startup, Nexus Flow. I was also the one who created the complete brand identity and user interface that helped them secure their Series B funding round, worth $15 million. But that's not what the final project credits will say. This is how the real world works, Victoria laughed as she shared her screen during our Zoom call, displaying the contract termination notice. Don't take it personally. She called it budget restructuring. I called it theft. The moment felt surreal. Behind her on the video call, I could see her sleek downtown office with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art, while I sat in my cramped home office surrounded by my daughter's school projects taped to the wall. I stared at the document she was scrolling through, my heart racing. After 6 months of designing every pixel, every color scheme, every user flow that made their app intuitive and beautiful, I was being dismissed like a temp worker. Effective immediately. I'm sorry, Maya, she said with a dismissive wave, not looking sorry at all. But we're bringing design in-house now. Fresh perspectives, you know how it goes. No, I didn't. Not like this. Not after the sleepless nights I'd spent perfecting their vision. Just breathe, I told myself, keeping my face steady on camera. I didn't want her to see my hands shaking off screen. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Thank you for the opportunity, I said quietly, reaching for my mouse to end the call. She looked surprised by my composure. I suspect she expected me to beg for more time, or plead for partial payment. But when you've been freelancing for 5 years, you learn how to swallow your pride, even when it feels like glass going down. I didn't ask why my name wasn't mentioned in their investor presentation last month. I didn't need to. 2 weeks earlier, I had delivered the final design files for their mobile app launch, the most complex project I'd ever tackled. I'd spent 3 months crafting every interaction, every animation, every detail that made their product shine. The day before their big presentation, I'd seen their pitch deck on LinkedIn. My designs were everywhere, but my credit was nowhere. Don't worry, Maya, she'd said during our last check-in call, brushing it off casually. This is just how these things work. You'll get a great reference. I didn't push back. I should have. Now I was staring at my laptop screen, the Zoom window closed, my project files suddenly feeling like evidence in a crime I'd helped commit against myself. My email was already locked out of their project management system, my access to their shared drives revoked before I could even save my work-in-progress files. In my home office, I sat in my desk chair for nearly an hour, staring at my portfolio folder, my chest tight with frustration. I wasn't just angry. I was devastated. Not because the contract ended, though that hurt, but because I'd let her use my creativity and then erase me from it. Because I'd seen the warning signs and still poured my heart into every design. As the afternoon rain started hitting my window, I thought about Zoe, about next month's rent, the school supplies I still needed to buy, the laptop repair I'd been putting off. I thought about the weeks of working until 2 a.m., of falling asleep at my desk with design software still running, of the evenings Zoe had made herself dinner while I obsessed over just one more revision. I thought about the time Victoria told me during a video call, freelancers are great for execution, but they don't understand real business strategy. She was wrong. That night, as the rain continued outside my window, I opened my backup laptop and logged into my cloud storage. I'd saved every version of the Nexus Flow designs, every iteration, every creative brief, including the original wireframes with my digital signature and timestamps. I hadn't meant to be paranoid. I just believe in protecting my work. What I didn't know then, what Victoria didn't know, is that the head of their biggest competitor, Marcus Thompson, was a former colleague of mine. We'd worked together 6 years ago at the advertising agency before I went freelance. He'd once told me over coffee, if you ever want to do something meaningful, call me. The people who create deserve more than the people who just profit from it. I never called, but maybe it was time. As I scrolled through my contacts, His name appeared like a lifeline I'd forgotten I had. I tapped his number and hit call. Maya Rodriguez calling Marcus Thompson. Marcus, I hope I'm not bothering you. You might not remember me, but we worked together at Sterling and Associates. I'm calling because something happened with a client, and there's something you need to know about the designs that just helped Nexus Flow get their funding. My voice caught slightly as I explained everything. What I didn't realize then was that this single phone call would set off a chain of events that would expose the very company that thought they could steal my work, and that by the end of the week, I'd be sitting across from Victoria, not as her disposable contractor, but as her competitor. By the time I hung up, my hands were steady for the first time all day. It wasn't relief. It was determination, the kind that comes from finally fighting back after being walked over too many times. I didn't know if Marcus would actually help, or if this would lead anywhere. But at least I had spoken up. At least I hadn't just faded away quietly like they expected me to. That night, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of our small house settling, the quiet broken only by Zoe's gentle breathing from her room down the hall. She'd fallen asleep on my bed earlier, waiting for me to finish work stuff. I hadn't told her what happened yet. I didn't want to worry her, not until I knew what came next. At 8:15 the next morning, my phone rang. Maya, of course I remember you. Marcus's warm voice filled my kitchen. I still have that brand strategy you designed for the Peterson account hanging in my office. I've been thinking about our conversation all night. We need to talk. I have some questions and a proposition I think you'll want to hear about. I set my coffee down so quickly it sloshed onto the counter. Marcus Thompson wasn't just any consultant now. He was the founder of Thompson Strategic, known throughout the industry for his integrity and his commitment to supporting independent creatives. If he wanted to meet, this wasn't just sympathy. I agreed to meet him that afternoon at a cafe downtown. Maya, Marcus said, sliding a tablet across the table showing Victoria's latest Instagram post celebrating their innovative in-house design team. I've looked at your portfolio samples. He paused, his expression serious. And I'm furious. I thought you should know the designs they're crediting to their internal team weren't created by them, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. That was my work. Of course it was, he said. I could tell from the typography choices alone. It had your aesthetic all over it. He asked questions, sharp, detailed ones about the user interface flow, the color psychology behind my choices, even the way I'd structured the mobile responsiveness. I answered them easily, not because I'd prepared, but because it was mine, every single pixel of it. Maya, he said finally, I'm pulling my recommendation for Nexus Flow from our client network effective immediately. My breath caught. You're sure? Absolutely. I don't work with companies that steal from creatives, he said, then added, and I don't let talent go to waste either. We still need someone with your skills for a major project. I've been planning to launch a design collective for independent creatives. I want you to come in as creative director and co-founder. It's yours if you want it. I stared at my reflection in my laptop screen, speechless. You always had an eye for innovation, Maya. You just never had the platform to showcase it properly. I can give you that. But I need an answer soon. I want to move fast on this. I was quiet for a long moment. I need to think about it, I said finally, though my gut already knew. I understand, he said. But don't wait too long. You deserve more than being a ghost in someone else's success story. We ended the call and I sat in my home office, my phone still warm in my hand. Me, creative director? I thought about everything that had brought me here, the endless revisions, the ignored suggestions, the condescending comments. I thought about the words that had been echoing in my head since yesterday. Freelancers don't understand real business. She was right, in a way. But maybe it was time to change what real business looked like. That night, I told Zoe everything. She was curled up in the corner of my bed, wearing her favorite paint-splattered art camp t-shirt. They just took your designs, she asked, her face scrunched with confusion. But you worked so hard on them. I know, sweetheart, I said, tucking a curl behind her ear. But something good might come from this. She looked at me with that serious expression she gets when she's trying to understand adult problems. Are you worried about money? A little, I admitted. But I'm also excited about what's next. The next morning, I called Marcus. I'm in. Perfect, he said. Your new title is Creative Director of Thompson Creative Collective. I'm sending the partnership agreement today. 3 hours later, the industry newsletter blast went out. Thompson Strategic launches Independent Design Collective, poaches top talent citing ethical concerns with current industry practices. Word was that several major agencies were scrambling to respond. I grinned as I imagined Victoria's face when she saw the announcement. But that was just the opening move. The next day, Victoria's assistant sent multiple emails trying to schedule a reconciliation call to discuss ongoing collaboration opportunities. Marcus forwarded them to me with a brief note: she wants to talk to the creative director. Your call. And so the following morning, when the video call connected and Victoria's polished face appeared on my screen, looking notably less confident than before, I adjusted my new Thompson creative business card in view of my camera and said the words I'd been rehearsing. This is Maya Rodriguez. You're speaking with the creative director. The silence on the other end was electric. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of her expensive microphone. Maya, she finally said. I wasn't expecting you. I figured, I replied, keeping my voice steady. You were trying to reach the creative director of Thompson Creative Collective. That's me now. She gave a nervous laugh, the kind someone uses when they're desperately trying to regain control of a situation that's already slipped away. Look, Maya, this is obviously some kind of misunderstanding. I didn't know there was an issue between you and Nexus Flow. Had I known you were pursuing other opportunities, I would have handled the transition differently. I let that hang in the digital space for a moment. The sheer nerve of it. You didn't know? I said slowly. You stripped my name from the design credits in your investor presentation. You showcased my work as your internal team's creation. Then you terminated my contract without notice. But you didn't know there was an issue? Her voice shifted, more defensive now. I was under pressure from investors. The board wanted to see in-house capabilities. I had to make strategic decisions. You know how this industry works. And honestly, Maya, you're a talented designer, but freelancers just don't understand the bigger business picture. That hit harder than I expected, not because I believed her, but because it was the same dismissive attitude I'd encountered for years. Too creative, too detail-oriented, too independent. Good enough to do the work, but not good enough to get the credit. You made a mistake, she continued, and I don't just mean going to Marcus. You're damaging relationships you might need later. Think about your reputation. Think about your daughter's future. That was the moment something inside me snapped. She had just tried to use my child as leverage. You don't get to bring my daughter into this, I said, my voice turning ice cold. And I'm not damaging relationships. I'm building authentic ones. There was a long pause, followed by what sounded like frustrated typing. You know, she said, you used to be different. You used to be collaborative. That word. Collaborative. As if my professional courtesy had been weakness. I was never collaborative about being exploited, I said. I was professional, dedicated, but that professionalism ended when you decided my work was yours to claim. I'm not the one who should be worried about reputation. You are. I ended the call. That same day, Marcus and I met at his downtown co-working space. It was open, creative, and buzzing with energy. But it wasn't the modern furniture that struck me. It was the atmosphere. Everyone seemed genuinely engaged, passionate about their work. It felt authentic. You handled that beautifully, he said after I told him about the call. But prepare yourself. People like Victoria don't back down easily. He was right. By Thursday, the whispers started spreading, first on design forums, then in freelancer groups I was part of. Victoria was crafting a new story, that I'd breached contract terms, that I'd been unprofessional and demanding, that working with me had been challenging. It was so calculated, so predictable. I spent the rest of the afternoon gathering my documentation, screenshots of our conversations, project timelines, payment records. For 3 years of freelancing, I'd saved everything, not because I was paranoid, but because I'd learned to protect myself in a world that didn't protect independent creators. That evening, I received a direct message from Kai, a fellow freelancer. Maya, I don't know if you've seen what's being posted online, but I want you to know I've got your back. We all know the truth, and if you ever need someone to speak up, count me in. He wasn't the only one. Over the next 2 days, I got more than a dozen messages from fellow freelancers, all sharing similar stories: designs stolen, credits erased, payments delayed. Many of them had been too afraid to speak publicly. Some were still working with Victoria's network, quietly enduring. You were the first to call her out, Kai said during a video chat. But now that you have, some of us are ready to share our experiences too. By the end of the week, I had more than moral support. I had evidence, screenshots of conversations, metadata from stolen designs, contract violations, pieces of a pattern that revealed years of systematic exploitation of independent creatives. The best part? I didn't need to use most of it, because NexusFlow's investors were already asking questions. On Monday morning, a post appeared on TechCrunch: NexusFlow faces scrutiny over design credit controversy. Their funding announcement was quietly removed from their website. Their stock valuation rumors dropped significantly. And then I got the message I hadn't expected. Maya, this is off the record, but several investors are reviewing NexusFlow's practices. Multiple freelancers have come forward with similar stories. There's talk of requiring an external ethics audit. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You opened the floodgates. A friend in the industry. I read it twice before setting my phone down. My breathing was calm now. Victoria said I didn't understand business, but it was starting to look like she was the one who'd miscalculated. By the following week, the story had gained traction. Tech startup under fire for systematic design theft. NexusFlow's funding in jeopardy amid freelancer exploitation claims. I watched from my kitchen table as the updates rolled in, my laptop open, my phone buzzing with messages from journalists and supporters. Each notification felt like validation, not because I wanted Victoria to fail, but because the truth was finally breaking through the polished surface they'd tried to maintain. At Thompson Creative, things were accelerating rapidly. Marcus and I were assembling a collective, talented, passionate creatives, some of whom had left toxic client relationships after hearing my story. Others came from Marcus's professional network. But every single one of them shared the same vision: to build something transparent, fair, and genuinely collaborative. For the first time in years, I wasn't just fulfilling someone else's creative brief. I was designing the future I wanted to work in. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria wasn't finished. She wasn't someone who accepted public embarrassment quietly, especially not from someone she considered beneath her. That Friday, my lawyer Priya Shah called me. "You're not going to like this," she said directly. "Tell me," I replied, steadying myself. "NexusFlow filed a cease and desist order against you, claiming you violated your non-disclosure agreement and used proprietary design concepts to launch your competitive venture." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. "You mean the designs I created, the concepts I developed, and the techniques I'd been using since art school?" Priya chuckled dryly. "Exactly. It's intimidation. They're hoping you'll panic and disappear quietly, or better yet, stop working altogether." "Let them try," I said. "I documented everything. But I want to go on the offensive. We're filing a countersuit, copyright infringement, defamation, and breach of contract. We'll also be submitting supporting statements from other freelancers who've worked with them. Some have already agreed to testify." I leaned back in my desk chair, looking out at my small backyard where Zoe's art supplies were scattered on the patio table. It felt surreal. A month ago, I was just trying to finish a project and get paid. Now I was fighting for my creative rights in court documents and taking control of my professional story. But what surprised me most wasn't how quickly things escalated. It was how many people rallied around me. People like Jasmine, a fellow web designer I'd met at networking events. She reached out that evening. Maya, I've been silent too long. I worked with Victoria's team last year. They did the same thing to me. You were brave enough to speak up. I've attached screenshots of my communications showing how they stripped my credits from press releases. Use them if you need to. Jasmine. Then came Devon, a former contractor who'd worked directly with Nexus Flow. Victoria had me alter design attribution documents the month before your project ended. I have the original files. Your name was listed as primary designer before it was changed to Nexus Flow Design Team. They were planning this erasure all along. Devon. I stared at that message for a long time. Even knowing what I suspected, seeing the deliberate nature of it still stung, not because I doubted my worth, but because they'd been so calculated in stealing it. They hadn't just taken my work. They'd systematically erased my existence from it. But now, piece by piece, I was reclaiming the recognition they tried to steal. Priya moved quickly. Within days, she filed our response, attaching copyright registrations of my original designs, metadata proving creation dates, and affidavits from 3 other freelancers, all willing to testify about similar experiences. The cease and desist was withdrawn within 48 hours. No apology, no explanation, just silence. It was the most telling admission of wrongdoing I could have hoped for. The next week, Marcus and I presented our collective's portfolio to potential clients. Our pitch, a creative collaborative built on transparency, fair compensation, and authentic partnerships with independent artists. The response was overwhelming. We signed our first 3 clients that afternoon. As I drove home, I felt a rush of emotions, excitement, disbelief, and a deep sadness for all the years I'd spent believing I needed someone else's permission to value my own work. I had always thought the system was too entrenched, that established companies held all the power. But sometimes those companies forget that their success depends on the creators they exploit. And when those creators band together, the whole foundation shifts. That afternoon, I picked Zoe up from school. She bounced into the car, her backpack covered in new patches she'd sewn on. "How was your day?" I asked. She adjusted her seatbelt, then looked at me with serious eyes. "My teacher asked us who inspires us the most. I said you." I glanced over, feeling my chest tighten with emotion. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Because you didn't let them steal from you. And because now you get to help other people like you." I smiled, my eyes blurring with tears, not just because she understood what had happened, but because for the first time, I could see myself through her eyes, not as someone who'd been wronged, but as someone who'd chosen to make things right. By the end of the month, Thompson Creative Collective was gaining serious momentum. We'd officially launched with 3 major clients, one of them a direct competitor of Nexus Flow. The irony was perfect. The same company that once told me freelancers couldn't understand real business was now watching from the sidelines while I presented creative strategies to tech executives. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about building something better and showing other creatives that they deserved respect. Something shifted when the first journalist reached out. The article was titled "From Exploited to Empowered: The Designer Who Turned IP Theft into Industry Change." The writer had done deep research. She knew about the Nexus Flow designs, about my contract termination, and even referenced leaked internal communications about their external resource management strategy. "I'm not looking for a fight," I told her during our video interview. "But I am done pretending that what happened was acceptable. It wasn't. And I'm definitely not the only one who's experienced this." When the article published, the response was immediate and intense. My inbox flooded with messages from other freelancers, designers, even full-time creatives. This gave me the courage to confront my client about stolen work. Your story is mine, different company, same exploitation. I've been afraid to speak up for too long. Thank you. I should have felt victorious, validated. But instead, something heavy settled in my chest, because with every message I received, I realized how massive this problem really was. It wasn't just my experience. It was systematic. And now everyone was paying attention, including Nexus Flow. 2 days after the article went viral, Priya called me. They've brought in a reputation management company, she said. They're scrambling to control the narrative. Expect them to go public soon. Let them try, I replied. But it wasn't just damage control. It was a coordinated media blitz. They published a Medium post titled Growing Pains, Learning and Evolving as a Startup. It was full of corporate speak about communication gaps, process improvements, and valuing all contributors. They didn't mention me by name, but it was obviously crafted to minimize the impact. Then Victoria appeared on a startup podcast. I think we're living in a cancel culture where people are quick to tear down successful companies, she said in that polished tone I remembered too well. Look, growing companies make mistakes. We all do. But the reality is, not everyone understands the pressure of scaling a business. Sometimes contractors misinterpret normal business decisions. It was so carefully scripted, I actually did laugh. But what happened next caught me completely off guard. That night, I received a LinkedIn message from someone I hadn't heard from in over 8 years, Rachel Kim, former creative director at a major design agency where I'd worked early in my freelance career. She'd left the industry entirely and now taught design ethics at a university, but her name still commanded respect in creative circles. Her message was brief. Maya, I've been following your story. I believe every word. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. We met for coffee at a small cafe near her campus. She looked different than I remembered, calmer, more grounded, but she still had that sharp intelligence in her eyes. I left the agency world before Victoria's company really took off, she said. I saw the way contractors were being treated and knew I couldn't be part of that system anymore. But I never expected someone would finally stand up to it so publicly. You knew this was happening? I asked. She nodded slowly. I suspected it was widespread, but I didn't have concrete evidence. And honestly, I took the coward's way out. I just removed myself from the situation. I watched her carefully. There was no pretense here, just honest regret. You aren't the only freelancer Victoria's team has exploited, she continued. You were just the first one brave enough to fight back publicly. She reached into her messenger bag and pulled out a tablet, sliding it across the table. These are screenshots of conversations, contract amendments, and internal communications from my time consulting with agencies that worked with Nexus Flow. I think they'll strengthen your case if you decide to expand this further. I looked at the screen, my pulse quickening. Why now? Because it's time someone with a platform called out what's been happening to independent creatives, she said simply. And because you showed me that staying silent isn't protecting anyone, it's enabling the problem. We sat quietly for a moment, two women from different parts of the same broken system, one who'd escaped it, the other who was fighting to fix it. That evening, I reviewed everything on the tablet. Rachel hadn't been exaggerating. There were email chains detailing systematic credit removal policies, meeting notes where Victoria discussed managing contractor expectations, even a strategy document titled Maximizing External Talent ROI, Attribution Management Best Practices. I wasn't being targeted for personal reasons. I was part of a calculated business model designed to extract creative value while minimizing recognition costs. The next morning, I sent everything to Priya. Her response came within minutes. We need to go bigger with this. This isn't just about your contract anymore. This is an industry-wide issue. Are you ready to be the face of that fight? I stared at her text for a long time. Ready? No. Necessary? Absolutely. The decision to expand the case wasn't made impulsively. I spent that entire weekend with Priya, reviewing every document, every screenshot, every timeline, ensuring our facts were bulletproof. We weren't just challenging one company's practices. We were exposing a system. By Monday morning, our expanded filing had been submitted to the Federal Trade Commission, complete with documentation spanning multiple agencies and dozens of affected freelancers. We also prepared a comprehensive report for Creative Live's investigative journalism team, detailing patterns of systematic IP appropriation across the tech startup ecosystem. I thought I'd feel overwhelmed when everything went public. Instead, I felt something I'd never experienced before: purposeful, powerful, and completely at peace with the fight ahead. The story exploded across social media within hours. Tech startup accused of systematic IP theft from freelancers. Internal documents exposed how NexusFlow built success on stolen designs. The dark side of the gig economy, creative exploitation revealed. Former contractor Maya Rodriguez ignites freelancer rights movement. Suddenly, I had become the story, not the designer who was cheated, but the woman who refused to let her work be stolen. My phone didn't stop ringing for 3 days. Journalists, fellow freelancers, creatives from Portland to Miami. Some called it brave. Others called it professional suicide. But for me, it was neither. It was essential. On Wednesday morning, Marcus knocked on my home office door holding 2 coffee cups and wearing the biggest grin I'd seen in months. "You've started a revolution," he said, handing me a steaming mug. "I didn't mean to," I replied. "That's exactly why it's working," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "How are you holding up?" I took a deep breath. "Overwhelmed, but determined." "I knew you had the courage to change things," he said quietly. "But I didn't anticipate how fast it would spread." He wasn't wrong. Within a week, Victoria had stepped down as CEO amid strategic restructuring. Anonymous sources revealed that NexusFlow's board had received multiple complaints about contractor treatment over the past 2 years but had chosen to ignore them. A former project manager came forward publicly, confirming systematic practices of removing freelancer credits and misrepresenting external work as internal development. The company's PR team issued a vague statement about recommitting to ethical partnerships with independent contractors. Victoria? Her social media went completely dark. No inspirational posts, no thought leadership, just digital silence. I didn't feel victorious, not even for a moment, because this had never been about bringing her down. It was about lifting up recognition. Recognition for the thousands of freelancers like me, invisible creators, unsung innovators, the ones who build beautiful things and then watch others take credit. It was about changing the story for all of us, for each other. Zoe and I sat on our back porch that Friday evening. The spring air was getting warmer, and the sky was streaked with pink and gold. "Mom," she said, looking up from her sketchbook, "my art teacher showed our class the article about you." I raised my eyebrows. "Oh? What did she say?" "She said you're proof that artists don't have to let people steal their work," Zoe replied, leaning into my side. "I think that's pretty awesome." I wrapped my arm around her, feeling the significance of that moment, not just for my career, but for what she now understood was possible when someone decides to fight for what's right. Later that evening, I opened an email from the Rhode Island School of Design. They wanted me to keynote their annual Creative Rights Symposium. The proposed title, From Exploitation to Empowerment, Reclaiming Creative Ownership. I accepted immediately, not because I enjoyed being in the spotlight, but because someone needed to stand up and say it clearly: the way freelancers have been treated isn't acceptable, and it doesn't have to continue. The following month, NexusFlow formally settled the case: a confidential financial resolution, public acknowledgement of my creative contributions, and the implementation of new freelancer protection policies. More than the money, the settlement required them to establish a contractor rights advocate position, maintain transparent attribution practices, and publish annual reports on their external partnerships. It wouldn't solve the industry's problems overnight, but it was a foundation. As part of the agreement, I refused any non-disclosure restrictions. If they thought they could buy my silence, they clearly hadn't understood what this fight was really about. I continued as creative director of Thompson Creative Collective, leading us into our second year with an expanding roster of clients, a reputation for fair practices, and a waiting list of talented freelancers wanting to join our mission. But more importantly, I stayed vocal, because stories like mine only create change when they're shared, when they help others realize their experiences aren't isolated incidents, that exploitation isn't the cost of creative freedom, that we get to decide how our professional stories unfold. And for me, this wasn't an ending at all. It was the foundation for everything I wanted to build next.